I'm hoping to do things slightly differently this time around. I don't know if it's gonna work, but if you guys could let me know, that would be great. Just leave a comment down below. Hi guys, it's April, and it's that time to let you know how my July went. But as I mentioned, I want to do things a little bit differently. A lot of the things that you are very familiar with my wrap-ups, with the stats, and the mini reviews are going to stay. But I figured since this channel is a little bit about reading and a little bit about coloring, that I'd combine them into one big monthly wrap-up, especially since at this point in time, I don't have a huge array of things that I end up finishing for my coloring because all of my coloring is very detailed. But I've gotten to the point where I kind of want to start to incorporate that into my wrap-ups. So that is what's going to happen. I'm going to have the reading stuff first, and then I'll have the coloring at the end. I will leave timestamps down below in case you're interested in all of that. But otherwise, I'm just gonna start this. So for the month of July, I read 17 books. In this wrap up, I'm only gonna talk about 8 of them because in the middle of this month was the reading rush. I have a full wrap up of the 9 books that I read for that week. I will link it down below and up above in case you're interested. I also have daily vlogs for the whole week in case you've got some time to kill. So with all of those books read this month, my total for the year is now at 122 books. Fairly confident that I'm gonna hit my yearly goal. Still pretty sure I'm not gonna hit my stretch goal of 200 books unless something amazing happens. For those 17 books, I read 5,046 pages, bringing my yearly total to 30,390 pages total. On average, I was reading about 163 pages a day. This led to me reading about a book every 2 days. I read a total of 48 hours this month, bringing my pages per hour to about 197 pages. As for my coloring, I only completed 2 pages this month, which is why I've decided that I think it's okay to start adding those to the end of my wrap-ups. Most months, I'm probably not going to have anything completed, especially since this month I've decided to start doing a Thomas Kincaid, and that's going to take me a year. I hope not, but probably. But with all of those stats out of the way, I'm just going to jump right into talking about each of the books that I read. The first book I want to talk about is Wild Child by LaVerne Thompson. I got an e-arc copy of this book from NetGalley. I have a full review over this book as well. I will link it up above and down below. This is the story of Kasha, who is an artistic soul who has been ostracized from her family. She receives a vision of her parents' death and tries to go and stop it from happening, but unfortunately does not succeed. In fact, she ends up seeing the being that killed her parents and flees for fear of her own life. Along the way, she ends up at this road stop where she ends up meeting a lot of other beings that are in the fight to fight these demons. This is a book that is packed full of vampires and shifters and magic and mages. It is a whole ecosystem of supernatural beings, which was very fun to read. It was a little slow at the beginning because you were getting a lot of this info dumping, but it did end up picking up its pace as a lot of things started happening. I did struggle a little bit with the main character and how she was reacting to being indoctrinated into this new group. She was dealing with a lot of grief and a lot of loss, and you weren't seeing that play out on the pages. She was very trusting, very upfront. So I struggled with some of the character depth within this book, and I struggled a little bit with the fact that the magical system was a little confusing when it was dividing up between several different worlds. The naming system didn't help because they were very, very similar, but it did leave on a major cliffhanger, and I really need to know what happens next. The next book is Reticence by Gail Carriger. This is the 4th book in the Custard Protocols, which is the 3rd series set in this world. This story centers all around Percival, who is just such a nerd, such a geek, such a highbrow professor type that most people don't understand him. When the ship decides to take on a new doctor, things start to go in an interesting path for Percival. I enjoyed this so much. It came to me at the perfect time. I had forgotten that I hadn't gotten this book yet. I picked it up and I enjoy this world so much. You have vampires, you have werewolves, you have Victorian times, and just the sass and the way Gail Carriger writes all of these characters, you can't help but laugh through most of it. But at the same time, you have such a diverse cast of characters who just are who they are and don't care what other people think. And that's just so enjoyable to read. So if you haven't picked up anything in the Soulless universe, I highly recommend that you do. Are you done? Can I finish filming now? Is that allowed? Okay. Next is A Tyranny of Petticoats, edited by Jessica Spotwood. This is a collection of 13 different stories, all about powerful women all throughout history. Each of these short stories is written by a different author. Some of them I knew, some of them I didn't know. I did enjoy reading it. There were definitely stories that I enjoyed more than others, such as Marrisa Meyer's In Her Chinese Spiritualist, set in 1877, and Elizabeth Wen's story about Coleman and her last flight in 1926. Those are the stories that pulled to me the most, but just getting all of the different time periods and seeing all of the different women and how they were handling what was going on around them, I like this read. And in completion of my Renegades reread, I finished Supernova by Marrisa Meyer. This is the third book in the Renegade series. This follows Nova, who is on a mission to usurp the Renegades, and this is also the story of Adrian, who is a renegade. I won't spoil too much of this one. I did do a collab with Steve over at the Lawn Gnome and Shay over at Shay Geeks Out, all centered around the Renegades versus the Lunar Chronicles. It was so much fun to do. I highly recommend that you go check it out. I will link it for you, of course, but I did all of my reread just for that versus, and going back and rereading the Renegade series now has hit me a lot harder than when I first read it, so I'm definitely glad that I did this reread. And of course, I have a full review over this book the first time I read this one through, if you want to see my original thoughts when I read it the first time. I also picked up Ice Planet Barbarian and Barbarian Alien by Ruby Dixon. This was just a pure romance, smut, fluff read for me. I just needed something that just was an escapism experience for me. And this was very entertaining, both volumes were. I enjoyed the second volume a little bit more than the first one. I just liked the character a little bit more. She seemed a little stronger in my opinion. There are a few things to note about this series. There is some consent issue, and there's also rape involved in the first volume, so I'll put that out as a trigger warning for anybody. This is a series that is centered around humans who are abducted from Earth. They have been collected to be sold off as slaves on another planet, but something goes wrong and they end up being dropped off on this inhospitable planet. The girls are calling not Hoth because of just how much snow there is everywhere. Then they discover the aliens of the planet, who are very tall and very blue. And that's where I'm leaving that. I also got to read an e-arc copy of The Fox and the Little Tanuki, Volume 2. This is a continuation of Senzu and Manpachi's story as they're slowly growing closer together, whether or not they want to, and just a lot of different shenanigans that go around as this fox spirit tries to raise and keep this Tanuki safe from the outside world. Now, originally when I picked up the first volume, I wasn't overly impressed. It felt like it was for a younger audience, and it wasn't very exciting, maybe because it had a lot of things that it was trying to bring across the audience. However, this second volume started to dive into some deeper, darker things and pasts that I really enjoyed seeing, and it felt like it was starting to be flushed out a lot more. So I'm excited to see where this series goes. I'm going to give it one more volume before I decide if I want to continue or cease reading this series, but so far I am liking the direction it is going. The last book I want to talk about is another e-arc copy that I received from NetGalley called A Gentle Noble's Vacation Recommendation, Volume 1. This is the story of a nobleman who ends up in a different world and decides to just enjoy himself until he can return to his own. This manga has a feel of a guild-style video game where there's a guild involved in quests as well. It's very easy to get into, and the art is nice as well. And it's not a flashy or showy manga by any means. Now, I will admit that this style of story plot isn't my favorite. I also have to mention that I struggled a little bit getting to know the characters and getting a feel for the timeline. A lot of things seemed to happen, and we were expected to believe it happened in a long period of time. And the main character seemed to pick up on information fairly quickly, even though we ourselves weren't given that information. He seems to just know it off of the top of his head, even though he was dropped into a completely new world, which felt very odd. I know this book is setting up the foundation for the series, but I just felt like this one was all over the place, and I didn't particularly find it overall enjoyable. But I know people who like this style of video game and like this style of read will probably really enjoy this one. So those were all of the books I finished. I now am going to quickly go over the coloring pages that I completed. The first one I completed was in Pick Candle's coloring book. It was a quick little doodle page that I did. I wanted to use my Kuretake Cure colors to color this one in because I don't use them a whole lot. So I did a very simple color palette and just played with what I have because I don't have a huge collection of those kind of alcohol markers. I think it turned out very adorable, but it was just something quick and easy to do, and I have a full speed color if you want to go check that out. And I also have a couple of live streams that you can watch if you want to watch it in real time. The next one that I completed was in Sakuram's Dark Fantasy coloring book. I called her a stone girl because of how I decided I want to color her. I did a Copic base where I just laid down a solid sheet of color, and then I went back with both Holbein and Polychromos colored pencils and started to fill her in and shade her in even more. This one was done a lot quicker than I actually expected because things like this tend to take me quite a long time, but I managed to get her done in 2 sittings, which was very surprising to me. But I do really like how she turned out. And of course, I have the live streams in which I colored her on up. Planning on getting her speed color done soon, probably in a couple weeks or so. So if you want to see that one, of course, subscribe down below so that you are notified when that video goes up. Otherwise, that was the month of July for me. Tell me down below your favorite thing about the month of July, what you read, what you did, just something that just made your heart happy. I would just love to hear how your July went. Otherwise, if you want to stay up to date with every time I upload, subscribe down below, and I heart you beautiful faces.